So,
well, let's.
what's your name, bro?
Jamie.
Jamie, Bob. You know that's not my real name.
Yeah. Wait, really? You've been saying that when Muslims call you cartoon character, you say, "Oh, that's my name, Bob." You know,
that's what I say. Call me Bob. Anyway, so just describe yourself. Where are you coming from in all of these? Because you wanted to ask me some questions. I wanted to ask you some questions.
I don't have a certain position yet because I'm still trying to research and gather information around here. And
you sound far less certain off camera than on. It's far less certain on camera than off camera. That's not what you said to me off camera over there.
Well, I'm trying to obviously, protect or cover up certain things. You know, I'm not quite comfortable being fully.
You understand it'll come out in the course of this conversation.
But I just would like to ask you. I mean, can you explain how you became a Christian again? Because it's very fascinating.
So I became a Christian because a Muslim tried to convert me to Islam.
But before that, you were just an atheist.
I was just a materialist, in that I followed the general kind of consumerist culture of the West.
So agnostic?
No, these questions didn't even come to mind. They weren't questions that I asked myself.
But you were aware that you lived in a country that was historically Christian?
No, not really. That was not a conscious reality. But what happened was a Muslim assumed that I was Christian because I was white, right? And then started to try to convert me to Islam by using the general run of arguments that they use continuously here at Speaker's Corner. The Bible is being changed, the Bible's unreliable, Jesus never claimed to be God, the Trinity doesn't make sense, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
And as I explored those issues and I looked into them, I realised that his criticisms of the Christian faith were... JC, it's for sound, are we alright with the guy on the other side?
Yeah, because it's over there.
Okay, right. So in terms of our the faith, I started to look into it. I realised that everything that he was telling me was either a partial lie or an outright lie. So he often delivered some truth mixed in with a whole lot of spin.
Yep.
But when I looked into it, I realised where the spin was and where the facts were. And that propelled me down a path of further investigation, looking into Islam, and looking into the Christian faith, and I became a Christian in that sort of process.
So for your own research, where you wanted to know more about Islam, I take it, at start?
I spoke with the Muslims. I got took to a mosque.
And naturally, because Islam has connections to Christianity, you explored Christianity.
Islam and Christianity don't have connections.
Well, the Muslims claim that Jesus was a prophet. So they
claim some guy called Isa was a prophet,
right.
But Isa is not, as a name, it doesn't correspond to Yeshua. And also, in terms of a person, historically, there's no correlation between the Isa of the Qur'an and the historical Jesus that history testifies to.
Are you sure in the Qur'an they mention the Virgin Mary? That's supposed to be
the Virgin Mary, and again, the Virgin Mary
I know they do,
in the Qur'an
they do mix
is
it
not
up
the
with,
Virgin Mary of
they
the
do mix it
New
up
Testament.
with Moses' sister.
There's all kinds of historical fallacies, because what happened, I believe strongly that what happened was, in an age and a time when people receive their education orally, verbally, in conversation, Muhammad was a traveller and a trader for his first wife Khadija. He looked after her business interests. He travelled around Syria and other places. He would have met Christians and Jews. He lived with Jews in Medina. And in that process, he assimilated ideas and concepts into his own worldview that he didn't fully understand. And then we find these in the Quran. So we've got stories that have been mixed up and twisted based upon Muhammad's misunderstanding of them, rather than anything factual, which is why I say that there's no correlation between the two.
Interesting you say that, because I'd say Christianity and Judaism could also be seen as mixing up different ideas into something that's new.
Well, in terms of the Christian faith, what ideas do you think we're mixing up?
Well, the Christian faith's foundations is on Judaism.
Correct.
Right. So, and then I believe that the idea of Jesus, I view the Old and New Testament as allegory rather than literal. I mean, no doubt, there's some real events that happen at these things.
Yeah.
But I think throughout all these great epics, whether it's the Trojan Wars or the Three Kingdoms period, or all these other really powerful stories that all have a similar sort of like, beginning, middle, end, where it's about.
You're going to have to speak up for the camera.
So
No. I just want to make sure you speak up. Project your voice.
So as I was saying, let's take Judaism. I see that as a mix of Egyptian theology as well as Zoroastrianism and some of the pagan elements of the Canaanites. It makes more sense that the Jewish theology is based on, basically it's almost like a manifesto on racial superiority in terms of erasing one race of people because the Jewish race is the most important race.
Right. So in terms of the Christian faith, I'm guessing you're an atheist.
I would call myself a philosophical pagan. So
A philosophical pagan.
yes, it's.
I mean, because I'll address your point in the sense that if you obviously don't believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you don't believe that Jesus Christ is God, then the idea you will obviously have to look for another explanation as to where the origin of those ideas come from.
They come from multiple gods that follow
well,
that trend.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I would just like to ask you, in terms of, because you asked me a bunch of questions over there that I'm yet to wait for you to elicit here.
Yeah.
And are you going to ask me the same questions over there?
Your ideal Christian state.
Yeah, we will
like
come to that because that's why we ended up on camera just now. But in terms of the
just establishing
in terms of the Christian faith,
establishing our background.
In terms of the Christian faith, Christians believe that God has revealed himself through history, but that revelation through history is not something that is independent to anthropological processes. So anthropological processes are fundamental to the revelatory experience. So God reveals himself through the works of men, by the works of men, to men.
Right.
Yeah? So when you've got the stories of the Exodus, which is the chief story of the Bible.
Yep.
Yeah?
Or the Old Testament.
Yeah, the chief story of the scripture isn't about racial supremacy. The chief story of the Judaism that their faith is based around is the idea that God has chosen a people and delivered them from Egypt. And the primary narrative,
They were chosen before
yeah,
they went
all
to
the way
Egypt.
through the prophets, they keep going back. When I pulled you out of Egypt, when I brought you out of Egypt, and they're invited to continuously remember the fact that God has saved them. Yeah, all the prophets that came later were all prophets of the Mosaic covenant, and the Mosaic experience was God delivering his people from from Egypt.
Yeah.
Okay, so it isn't about racial supremacy and about one group wiping out another group, though there are examples of that in the Old Testament. But that is the supreme narrative of the Old Testament. The supreme narrative is God electing a people and delivering them and establishing covenants with them. So that happens with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Through Jacob, he establishes Israel. Then he delivers Israel through Moses. And then the prophets continuously call the people of Israel back to the covenant of Moses, whilst pointing forward to a coming Messiah.
Right. And we come to the New Testament now, where instead of the temple, Jesus is the ultimate sacrifice that redeems everyone.
Yeah, he's the Lamb of God that redeems the
And
world.
now it's no longer secured to just one group or tribe of people.
And he's now opened up. Yeah. So what happens is that from that people Israel, who are the vine tree, God now grafts in other vines onto this vine so that they become part of Israel. So God is still redeeming Israel, God is still saving Israel, but he's bringing the Gentiles into this covenant. He's now expanded it into a new covenant that includes the Gentiles, which is you and me.
Yes.
Yeah? Now,
It does feel like there's a hierarchy going on where Jews are inherently going to be more favoured or more important.
no, it actually says exactly the opposite. It
Really?
says that now in Christ there's neither Greek nor Jew.
Okay.
So it says exactly the opposite of what you just said. The Christian faith teaches a radical equality between all of humanity that is not defined by race or class or gender or other attributes, because we're all made in the image of God. But then it also has this understanding of a family. So whilst I owe you certain things because you're made in the image of God, I owe my family, the church, something more because they are my family. I owe them something that is above what I owe to you. I owe them a discrete kind of loyalty, a discrete kind of solidarity with them.
The church family is more important than your biological family.
Yes, the church family becomes more important than your biological family.
It's interesting. All right, so
if your biological family is not Christian.
Well, all right. Okay, but then again, I wouldn't say all Christians are the same. What would you say?
Well, it depends what you mean, because the vision of the Christian eschatology culminates in what we see as happening in heaven. Like, we see that many nations from many races and tribes come together in the worship of the one true God.
So do Protestants expect Catholics to be in the same heaven as they are?
I am not going to speak for Protestants, let them speak for themselves. I'm stood in front of you and I'll give you my opinion. And my opinion is that the church is that collection of disciples that seek to follow Christ in their everyday life. And that those disciples can be found in all the great churches: Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, in churches in Africa, churches in Europe, churches in Asia.
But with Catholics, their theology is based on a representative of another.
Again, I'm not going to speak for Catholics. I'm going to speak for myself.
Right.
The Christian church are those disciples seeking to follow Jesus.
Yes, but I feel that Catholics are having.
Say again?
I feel that Catholics in their theology are worshipping more things than just Jesus.
Well, I mean, if you actually go and speak to Catholics, they will make
I
a
grew up as
distinction.
Catholic, by the way.
That means absolutely nothing. Those that worship that you give to someone of a lesser degree. And the reason for that is, if you actually look into the meaning of the word worship, it comes from a Middle English Anglo-Saxon word skipe, which means to give due honour. So every time you bow to the Queen, you're giving her due honour. If I address you as Mr., that's giving you due honour. If I stand for the judge as he enters the courtroom, I'm giving him due honour. Mayors in England, one of their official titles is his worship or her worship.
So when the Pope, bows to the statue of the Virgin Mary, that's not worship.
That is not divine worship. That is not latria. That is due only to God. The Catholics would say this is dubia, which is appropriate veneration to Mary, appropriate honouring of Mary, who is the mother of God.
So when Catholics say we must never go to our Lord Jesus Christ except only through Mary,
those kinds of statements are not dogmatic of the Catholic Church. They are statements by certain spiritual groups within the Catholic Church and don't represent a full understanding of Catholic dogma.
I think it's interesting when you look at history.
But why do you focus on the Catholic Church so much?
Because the Catholic Church, I think, is a bit irredeemable right now.
According to who? And to what standards?
I watch your videos, man. Very encouraging. I'm a born-again Christian, man.
Thanks.
You've got so much more context to the Bible than...
What type of Christian?
I'm born-again Christian. That's who I am. I believe in the gospel.
Every Christian is a born-again Christian.
That's correct.
But you know, brother, when someone asks you that kind of question, the reason why they're asking you that kind of question is because they want you to affirm the narrative that Christians are divided. They want you to split the church into denominations. There's only one kind of Christian, and that is someone who is a disciple of Christ.
That's correct.
Amen.
Haven't we always been divided?
You're not part of we.
The Christians.
You're not part of we.
Well, European history shows.
No. You Europeans don't have a unique claim to the Christian church.
But they are Christian.
many Christians are Europeans, but it isn't the case that all Europeans are Christians. You have no claim to Christian heritage unless you're a Christian. An
did grow up as a
Ethiopian
Catholic. I
doesn't
have
mean
some-
nothing. Doesn't mean nothing. You don't have any claim at all to the Christian heritage on the basis of your ethnicity.
I'm not saying on ethnicity. I'm
That's
saying
exactly what you're saying. As a European,
No, I'm saying Europeans have their own unique brand of Christianity.
I am saying that the Christian faith is not unique to Europe.
Okay.
An Ethiopian Christian or a Latino Christian has more claim to St. Paul's in London, the Cathedral of St. Paul's, and more claim to the Vatican and more claim to Mount Athos than you do.
That's all fair dues. but
Because you have rejected your European history, you've rejected your European heritage, and you've rejected the thing that made Europe Europe, because you rejected the church.
All right, so we'll probably not agree on that point.
Are you a disciple of Christ?
No, I am a pagan.
Okay, you're a pagan. Now let's look at the European history for the last 1,000 years.
Fair enough.
Like, would you say that it has been formed in terms of Christianity?
Certainly later on, but the Christian foundations were on something else.
They were certainly built on something else. That's absolutely true. But those things were transformed. I mean, what makes a culture a culture? It's the things that, it's the way it organises its values, it's the way it's organising its priorities, it's its understanding of justice. But the way that pagan Rome understood, and the way that pagan Germans understood the order of values is different to how the church discipled European civilization. And when you reject the Christian faith, you're rejecting European civilization.
No, I acknowledge the Christian faith and I accept it part of my heritage, but doesn't.
It's not part of your heritage, though. You've rejected it.
No, as a European, there was a time where and to this day, Europeans are still mostly Christian.
Do you want Europeans to be proud of their history?
Of course.
So you want Europeans to be proud of their Christian identity?
I want them to be proud of all their identities.
What identities are we pointing to that is not rooted now or transformed by Christianity?
I think there's a big surge in paganism.
There is a resurgence in a new form of paganism that has no historical connection to the paganism of the past. The pagans of the past used to have human sacrifices. Do you agree with human sacrifice? Nope. Why don't you agree with human sacrifice?
Because when they were doing it, it was out of a not understanding how nature works.
No, the reason why you don't agree with human sacrifice is because Christianity has informed European culture that human sacrifice is evil. That's actually why you don't agree with human
Even though
sacrifice.
they descended from the Jews, which when they did practice both human and animal sacrificing.
They believed in animal sacrifice, not human sacrifice. Give me an example of human sacrifice in temple worship.
Well, remember before Abraham, was about to kill his son.
Did he kill his son?
No, but
What happened? Who did he kill?
All right. The official story says he
The only
replaced it with
story.
a goat.
The only
There
story.
are other alternatives saying he actually did kill his son, but let's not get into that. He changed the rules so that it'll be a goat that will be the scapegoat.
So it was
essentially.
exactly. So it was an animal sacrifice,
But
not
why?
a human.
But why was
sacrifice.
that
Sorry, just
suggested?
out of curiosity, you said that he killed somebody else or something else, not an animal. But you said that you read that, but you're not going to get into it. Just as a Christian, anyway.
Where did
Listen,
you read that? Why did you read that?
I just like to if you have a a book that I can go back to some historical.
Well, sorry, I just heard this for.
Can I just say that there is a danger, which I think is very prevalent in our culture, that people who want to answer these fundamental questions seek to do so in a way that isn't holistic, that isn't using the full collectiveness of our Christian heritage. And when they do that, they have to replace the missing parts of the picture with any information that they can get hold of. And the reality of that is that leads people like yourself to grasp at straws to put together a bigger picture.
Yeah, I'm always trying to seek the truth.
Yeah, but I would say that you're trying to find a way of avoiding the truth, because you will find any information you can that means you don't have to become a Christian.
No, I'm very open-minded.
So we'll go back to the identity, a European identity. You don't believe in human sacrifice because Christianity has taught you and has taught European civilization that human sacrifice is wrong.
No, it's more from a scientific level because when you look at the ancestors' point of view, they thought if they didn't sacrifice, then the seasons or the harvest would come. And we now know from science that no, they can't.
Well, let's look at that again, because now you've testified to the influence of Christianity. The rise of modern science in Western Europe is intrinsically linked to a Christian worldview. The natural philosophers explored the scientific world on the premise that because man was rational and was made in the image of God, God was rational and had created a rational universe that we could inquire into through rational inquiry. And that by doing so we could learn the mind of God and draw closer to God. So they saw it as a mystical exercise in drawing closer to God to investigate the natural world. So the rise of science grew out of a Christian narrative.
I would say,
so
I say it grew out despite Christianity.
So where's your evidence of that?
Well, you remember the guy who discovered that we circle around the sun.
Copernicus?
Yes.
Was a Christian?
Yes, but the Catholics didn't want him, telling that we're not actually the centre of the world according to the Bible. So what else could they get wrong?
Hold on. Copernicus and Galileo Galilei. Copernicus came first. Then Galileo Galilei came second. They were both practicing Christians. They both died as Christians.
By Christians.
No, actually, they weren't executed. Where's your evidence?
They're threatening the authority of the church.
Where was your evidence that they were executed by the church?
Because the church said that if you're going to tell people that we're not actually the centre.
Where was your evidence that they were executed by the church? Don't do the Dawah team trick of not answering the question. Where is your evidence that they were executed by the church?
I don't know, it's just so self-explanatory.
Self-explanatory. So now we can just make assertions based upon nothing but opinion and speculation.
It's one of those things where it's like, did the the Inquisition exist? And we could always talk about the details.
You're jumping around.
Exactly,
because the point is, bro, you don't want to acknowledge the fact that Christianity emerged from a Christian worldview. And you have a couple of these sound bites that you've picked up from the Enlightenment philosophers and the Enlightenment narrative, and you are using them to try and justify an unjustifiable position.
I would say most of the science was recycled from the ancient Greeks who weren't Christians.
That there is definitely the influence of Greek philosophy in terms of scientific inquiry, particularly the use of mathematics. However,
also the idea of God.
However, when you look at Copernicus, Galileo Galilei, Sir Francis Bacon, and numerous other scientists, that there was an explosion of scientific inquiry due to advancements in technology, which the church was not opposing, that they allowed man to inquire, and the church allowed human beings to inquire into the natural world.
Didn't Christians burn down the Alexandrian?
One second. No, that was Muslims.
Lastly, but
no, that was Muslims. No, again, you're just clutching at straws, bro. What happened to this?
It's the official story.
What happened to make history
great again?
It's the
official story.
It isn't the official story.
Oh, right.
You're just clutching at straws because
they made a whole film about this. Are you saying that whole film was based on?
Yes, it's a total lie. And if you're basing your history on films, you're not taking your cap.
No, I watched the
seriously.
films and then I researched, and it turns out
right.
it has happened.
So where's the evidence that Christians burnt down the Library of Alexandria?
Oh, it's all written down.
Where?
Just look on Wikipedia.
By who?
Oh gosh. Okay.
You're clutching at straws, bro.
Fine.
And you're clutching at straws like all of these fanciful...
People can do their own research.
They can.
I don't need to bring out
they can.
quotations.
No, that's fine. People can do their own research. You'll find that Muslims burnt down
I know
the Library
but
of Alexandria.
that was also, before then it was Christians, and before that it was accidentally by Julius Caesar.
Christians owned Egypt as a part of the Christian Empire. If we wanted to destroy...
Pagans and Jews,
if we wanted to destroy the Alexandrian Library, we had hundreds of years in which we could have done it, and we never did. The fact that in the 7th century... in the 7th century... No, we were dominating the Roman Empire from
pagans.
the 5th century.
We
had dominated the Christian Empire from Justinian that was 100 years after Constantine. You don't know history. Listen to your cap. Make history great again. Yeah, stop clutching at straws to put together some anti-Christian narrative to justify the fact that you can have an identity.
I wasn't bringing up an anti-Christian narrative. I was just telling you.
You're trying to I mean, you or someone.
I'm trying to be very non-biased here. Right? I'm not trying to like have a go at Christians or have a go at any specific group. If I
you're trying to deny the Christian heritage of Europe.
I did not say that.
You're trying to say that there are identities that are not Christian.
I'm saying that the Europeans and the Christian Europeans had a unique identity to other
to what?
Christians.
To African Christians?
Yep.
Yeah. Do you see that African Christians shouldn't come to Europe?
No, I mean.
Do you think that African Christians? I'm in favour of Christians from around the world coming to Europe, diluting our ethnicity, and getting rid of our whiteness. I've got no problem with it at all. I'm not saying that we should have it as an agenda, that we should actively pursue it. But I'm saying I've got no problem with it if it happens. Do you have a problem with it?
Well, let's just say this did happen in the future. Who's going to play any of the historical Brits in films or theatre?
Do you have a problem with the idea of Christians from around the world settling in Europe and changing the genetic code of the European?
Very much.
You have a problem with it?
Yes.
So you are an ethno-pagan nationalist?
Along those lines, yeah.
Yes. So you're an ethno-pagan nationalist, right? So
because paganism you cannot separate from the race,
right?
The culture.
Right. Well, actually, once again, you are.
There's no.
You're taking a 20th century. Like you're not a good student of history. You're taking a 20th century perspective, right? You're taking a 20th century perspective and applying it to the past. And you're not looking at history for what it is. The Europeans had no sense of being European.
Right.
Okay? Ethnic tribes had tribes.
Didn't also manifest himself into sort of other.
No, these were separate religions.
They all seem very similar.
They were separate
Shows how the Roman
religions.
Empire managed to conquer.
And they were also separated by centuries.
They could all trade the same gods.
They were separated by centuries. Roman paganism was separated.
In fact, there's more peace during the Roman Empire than there was in Christian Europe.
In terms of Christian Europe, in terms of Christian identity, all of these ancient pagan identities were converted. Their history has been lost. We have no connection to those druids of old.
No, we have it through Christianity.
We have no connection to those druids of old.
I think we have a lot of paganism in Christianity.
We give examples. What? Firstly, define what you mean by paganism.
Paganism is something that is that can correspond with every sort of nation and race, but they have their own unique flavour. And it's in Nordic paganism is different to say African paganism, Middle Eastern paganism.
You're defining paganism according to an ethnicity. That is not an accurate.
The history of its people.
That is not an accurate. That is not paganism. You're talking about ethno-nationalism and you're relabeling it paganism.
No, I'm saying Shinto is a culture that is obviously for the Japanese.
Right. So that's not paganism. Let's be clear. You aren't qualifying your terms.
That's why I say that I'm philosophical pagan.
So I'll give you an academic understanding of paganism. Paganism is the belief that the natural world has supernatural qualities that we can interact with supernaturally. Okay? Through things like human sacrifice, through worshipping holy trees, through contacting dead
sacrifice
spirits.
Is a big thing, but doesn't mean human sacrifice. It means sacrifice in general.
Well, I'm sorry, but you're clearly
you
not.
See these things in allegory.
You're not an authority on paganism, like you're not an authority on European history.
Yeah, that's why I love paganism. Okay. Everyone can have their own unique brand.
This is not paganism. You're talking about
paganism is the same.
You're relabeling paganism because you don't want to call yourself an ethno-nationalist.
No, I want to discover the truth. and understand.
So in terms, but the point is, when you're confronted with facts, all you do is assert your opinion.
No, these are your facts that you match your own opinion to sound
right.
like facts.
So, well, I mean, everyone is invited to look at what the definition of paganism is, and to see if it's something to do with ethnicity or a supernatural belief that the natural world has supernatural qualities. And you can look to yourself which one of us is giving a more accurate definition.
Point of view,
what I'm saying to you, though, is like, you have a problem with African Christians coming to Europe.
No, I didn't have a problem. I'm saying if you want them to should completely change the racial makeup.
I've got no problem with that if it happens.
I do. So
right. Why? Why is it wrong?
Because, like I said, imagine if we did become some caramel-looking people.
What's wrong with that?
Well,
we look brilliant.
Well, then we no longer.
We look good looking.
Now we no longer look like our ancestors.
So.
What do you mean so? So you don't like redheads, you don't want blondes, you don't want blue eyes.
No.
That's all like nothing worth cherishing.
Let's be clear.
Let the red squirrels die.
Yeah. Let's be clear. Let's be clear. I'm not saying that we need to actively pursue this as some kind of agenda point. But what I am saying is, if it happens by accident, I have no problem with it. Okay? What I do have a problem with is the idea that we can enclave parts of the world as being, in quote marks, white, and other parts of the world, in quote marks, black, and in other parts of the world, quote marks, caramel. I have a problem with that idea of understanding the world.
So when white Christians say that are for like ethno-nationalist causes, are those Christians in your opinion?
I would say that politically they are not following Christ. They're borrowing the political narratives of others because they haven't thought to themselves, what does a Christian political narrative look like? A Christian political narrative is internationalist. It is multi-ethnic. It is global. It is about the idea of the triumph of the church over all of her enemies. It is about the idea of the supremacy of Christ, of making Christ king in your own heart as an individual, in your fellowship, in your society, and in your country. It is the idea that Christians all worship God together from many tribes and tongues, worshipping the one true God. That is a global agenda, which means that Christians have to control territory to do that. But it doesn't mean that we control those territories to preserve a certain ethnicity.
Isn't it ironic that there are so many Christians who are right-wingers who do want to establish enclaves or separate societies?
I have been called, I would say, like, take for example, there's a woman you probably are familiar with, Faith Goldie.
Yep.
Yeah, you know Faith Goldie? She's someone who very much is pro-Christian and also pro a narrative of white empowerment. Mm-hmm. So she's bought into the racial narratives that are a reaction to the liberal progressive black identity movements, or the idea of the progressive sort of, we've got to find a persecuted minority that we can help, and then we define them by this ethnicity and then seek to help them and elevate them. And it's a reaction to that. My point is that is not a Christian way of thinking about the questions. A Christian way of thinking about the questions takes no factor about ethnicity into the dialogue. Like, it isn't about the colour of your skin, but about the content of your character. That's Martin Luther King, someone who taught and fought for equality on a Christian narrative without making it about being black.
Who also was very anti-Jewish.
I'm not going to get into whether he was anti-Jewish or not. My point to you is, and I'm not convinced that he is based upon every other error you've said about history so far, but my point to you is that your way of thinking about the world, are you honestly trying to say that there is something qualitative that is special about the fact that my skin has a pigmentation?
I think it's more about skin colour. It's to do with, because it's the reason why you have that pigmentation, because your ancestors have lived in the northern hemisphere.
But are you saying that there's something that I need to protect about my pigmentation?
I believe all animals, all ethnicities have a right to exist.
So you're saying yes? You're saying I should protect my pigmentation?
Preserve, yeah.
Right. So what's special about being this pinkish colour?
I just think it's great that we have all
such
unique people.
I have got no problems with being white, by the way. I'm not embarrassed about being white.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not ashamed of my white skin. But at the same time, I'm not saying that there's something special about it that needs to be preserved.
Right, that's your opinion.
And considering global warming, I probably need a bit more memory.
Others see their race as their extended family.
You what?
Others will see their ethnicity or race as their extended family.
And I would say this is why it is important that a muscular faith arises. Because if a muscular Christian faith does not arise, we will see more people buy into these un-European or alt-right extreme white narratives of ethnicity that ultimately will be the destruction of us all.
Right.
Like, you're pushing people like you push Europe over a cliff. Because what you're...
What about IC3 then? What about him?
Who?
IC3.
IC3. I don't really know enough about IC3's position to talk
he's
about.
for nationalism for all races, you know.
Right. Well, I'm against all ethno-nationalism, whether it comes from a black man or a white man. I'm against them all because they're not a Christian way of thinking about the question.
So you'd be happy if this happened, Africa was completely dominated by East Asians and Europeans and South Americans, as long as they're Christian?
What I'm saying is, I want to see the triumph of the church. That's what I'm working towards.
So you want Africa, if it happens,
I want Africa to be Christian.
Mixed, and that might mean completely mixed.
To answer your question directly, I want Saudi Arabia to be Christian. Right. I want the Middle East to be Christian. I want Southeast Asia to be Christian. I want Africa to be Christian. I want Europe to be Christian. I want every pagan to be Christian. I want every white nationalist to be a Christian.
He's an absolutist.
Yep, I am an absolutist. I want the triumph of the church. Today is Palm Sunday. Today's the day we celebrate Christ as King. And if we are saying Christ is King, then he has to be King of everything, not just something.
Well, as a European pagan, I will celebrate Easter in the pagan festival. You know?
Right. So let's just talk about this pagan Easter festival.
I don't really want to talk about this. I want to understand what's your ideal Christian state.
No. We are going to talk about it because you're trying to claim a heritage that I'm saying you have no right to.
But
those who buy into an ethno-nationalist narrative have no claim to European identity. None. They've given it up.
That's your opinion.
The moment you say you're not a Christian, you have rejected European civilization.
So do Jews not have a right to be ethnically Jewish or adopt the Jewish theology?
Your ethnicity is something that you're born with. I'm saying that it should not define your identity.
He's saying as a pagan I'm not allowed to lay claim over my
pagan
heritage, which is ethnocentric.
I am saying
that Jews have the right to claim.
I am saying that all Jews should become Christians, and when they become Christians, they stop being Jews within the kingdom of God.
But there were Jews. Well, every single Christian country in the world had Jews before it had Christians.
That makes it difficult,
yes.
In the midst.
Right.
So how can you say that we don't belong in this country?
But your comment is ahistorical, sir, because you couldn't speak meaningfully of a Christian country until there were Christians.
But if not for the Jews, there wouldn't be Christians.
Absolutely, the Christian faith
Jesus
was
a Jew.
Out.
Where would you Christians be without us Jews?
Yes, that is exactly what we believe. Telling me something that I believe already doesn't change what I believe. It's kind of the Dawa Muslim trick. They point out Christian beliefs.
I would rather listen to the beginners of the religion rather than the secondaries.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Here's the problem with what you're doing.
I go back to the source.
Yeah, let's come back to our conversation. Because what I'm saying is, I am saying that ethno-nationalists who abandon the faith have abandoned the very civilization that they are claiming to want to preserve.
You can't abandon something
because European civilization cannot be separated from Christianity, and Christianity is something that is multi-ethnic. And therefore, when you abandon Christianity, you abandon all of European history for the last 1400 years and more, and that means that you have no claim to European civilization. An Ethiopian has more claim to European civilization if they're a Christian than you do.
So my genes make no difference?
Your genes make no difference.
All right.